Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Context. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we're going to have an amazing show today. Before we dive into all the details of what's going on, I just wanted to give a quick plug and update for the MCP Dev Summit. We are just a couple weeks away now. I think we'll be going live 2 weeks from today in London. So hopefully lots of you can join us. And if you're speaking there, I can't wait to hear your talks. As always, it's the last 2 weeks is when things kind of get insane. I've been getting, of course, now that we've published the schedule, I've got every day 5 people reaching out that want to speak. So hopefully, if you're not speaking at the conference, but you have a great talk, you'll come join us here on The Context. I think we're going to have a lot of people who submitted talks, but we couldn't squeeze in joining us over the next couple of weeks, and the schedule is getting pretty backed up. So if you'd like to join us and come speak, please scan the QR code there and give us a talk. We're excited to hear all about what's going on in the MCP universe. This week we've got 2 talks. The first one is from the team at Prefactor. Matt and Simon are joining us all the way from Australia, where it's 2 in the morning, guys?
3.
3 in the morning. Yeah. Well, not that you would even know, right? Matt, you're in Sydney. Simon,
I did not realize it was 3 in the morning. That's dedication.
That's being a founder right there. These guys have the heart of lions or kangaroos. I don't know. Simon, you're in Melbourne, right?
Yep.
Awesome. So they're going to dive into identity and the work Prefactor is doing on kind of identity for MCPs. Looking forward to that. And then after their talk, Darren's going to give us a preview of Nanobot, a new project he just announced at nanobot.ai today. So very excited to see what Darren's been working on and really demo that and dive into it. Next week, we've got 2 really interesting talks. The first is from Haley at IBM, Haley Thao. She wrote an incredibly good paper on MCP security that I read and then chased her until she agreed to come on and talk with us. So I'm looking forward to having her join us. And then we've got a company called MCP Jungle, Raghav, who's going to talk about MCP gateways there. And then we'll be off for the summit. Darren and I will be off in London and with many of you, and we will be live streaming the summit here on this YouTube channel. So if you're not able to make it, I know Matt and Simon were just saying they were looking at that 18-hour flight and trying to figure out if they can make it. We'll have all the content on live stream. So we'll be streaming that all around the world as it goes, thanks to AWS, who is helping as a sponsor to get that out. So with that, let's get started. Today, as always, we try to keep our talks brief. So Matt and the guys and we're going to try to keep their talk under 20 minutes. Darren, even you need to try and keep it under 20 minutes, which I don't know what I'll do if you don't. Just cancel you. I don't know. But we will be stopping, around that time. And certainly your questions are always welcome. So as you have questions, just ping them in YouTube or X or Twitch or wherever you're watching the stream. And with that, let's get started. All right. So guys, I am going to turn the screen over to you.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And thanks very much for having us on the show. Coming from Australia, it is roughly 3 a.m. here. But we're very delighted to be able to just talk a little bit more about what we're doing. I'm calling in from Sydney. Simon, my co-founder, who's with me today, is calling in from Melbourne. So I guess what we're doing here is representing APAC. But I guess to give you a bit of an overview, we are Prefactor, and so we are building an agent identity platform. And so we're going to talk to you today a bit about what we see that's happening in the ecosystem, where the biggest gaps are, and how Prefactor addresses them. To give a bit of context, so myself and Simon have been building Prefactor for just over a year. We actually started focused as a human IDP and have kind of evolved into the MCP space, as many of the peers we know have done as well. And we know how exciting it is and how much good work's been going on in the space. And so it's great to be able to kind of share a bit more about what we're doing. Okay, so many of you listening will have heard this many times. So you're speaking to your company, or every company in the world right now is being asked by their board, by their C-suite, what is our agent strategy? Maybe a CEO reads the Wall Street Journal and has read the latest article from Salesforce about cutting headcount or the massive productivity gains that can be made through investing in agents. But what does that actually mean in the context of MCP or model context protocol? And I guess the expectations that developers have ultimately to turn that boardroom pressure into something real and something secure. And so I guess here at Prefactor, we've been speaking to hundreds of people over the past few months. And what's clear is that there is this massive mandate for us to be building and to be moving as fast as we possibly can. And whether it's kind of indie devs, whether it's small, medium-sized startups, or whether it's really big companies, the intensity of the innovation that's happening is both amazing and a little bit scary, I think, at times. And what's clearly very apparent is that guardrails barely exist at the moment. And I think the gap between what agents can do and what security teams can control continues to grow ever wider. And I think what it does, it sets up MCP as a brand new attack surface. So I don't need to tell the audience today, you guys are all experts in the space, but it's barely a year old and the adoption has been incredible. And I think what we've seen, even just over the short period of time that we've been exclusively focused on MCP, is not just the diverse set of use cases that companies are employing, but also what happens when you kind of go really broad and don't have that governance in place. And I was chatting with a very big company, very high. Everyone would know them if we talked about them yesterday. And the question I put to them was like, "Wow, how's it going? How are you employing MCP? What kind of structures you put in place for agents?" And the answer was a complete mess. We have little visibility. The most important thing for us is how do we get API keys off of our laptops and into secure locations. And I was like, that's a pretty low standard for what we're trying to achieve here and the impact this can have on your business. And so I think we'll talk a bit about this, but the difference between those big enterprises and what they're talking about and what maybe SaaS startups thinking about, different but valid. Everyone's already seen this, as you know, the security implications for getting it wrong are significant. I think the one joke I make to my customers is that there's going to be someone who's going to be the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, when it comes to security, and you really don't want to be that company that's on the front page of the BBC or CNN or whatever news article you read. Because it's going to happen. We're going to have a big security attack, and it's going to be because they haven't secured their MCP. So I guess when we break down the MCP problem from Prefactor's perspective, we've got really two kind of use cases. We look at this and we define this as external or custom MCP. And this was really where we started our journey. So our assumption was that the most popular, fastest uptake of MCP was going to be within companies looking to expose their APIs, their MCP service to customers. And that makes sense. It's about giving more value B2B, B2C. But innovation raced ahead. And I would say that because the use cases potentially have gone ahead of security, but the UI, so when we talk about this, we're talking really about ROI. And so why is a business going to be investing in this and how are we going to get the most impact? And so the UI is when I talk about Claude or ChatGPT, I think most of us listening in and most of us that have been involved in the space can acknowledge that the way that MCPs are integrated into your existing chat experiences with these agents is not as smooth as it possibly could be. And I think as a result, that somewhat limits the user experience and potentially kind of the adoption. And so I think that will come, obviously with ChatGPT being recently kind of investing in the space and getting on board with MCP, which we all love. That will come, but I think ultimately that feels a little bit slower in comparison to what we would define as internal MCP. And so when we think about this problem, we see this as being kind of the biggest opportunity in the space. And I'm very annoyed that my logos haven't come onto the screen. But what we found is that speaking with banks, insurance, technology companies, highly regulated industries, they're deploying servers at a rate of knots. And ultimately, it's about having really, really simple use cases. And it's about ultimately going back to like, why are they investing in technology in the first place? We were speaking with a really large real estate company over in Australia recently. And interestingly, not a typical company you would expect to be investing in things like LibreChat and building their own kind of fine-tuned LLM. But that was where they were at, and they wanted to invest in MCP because they saw the benefit of it takes 4 weeks to get data from one person in one team to their frontline workers. And using MCP means that they can do it really, really fast. And that was, I think a really key part of that use case. But ultimately, we don't see internals being safe. It doesn't mean it's safe. And, ultimately, they don't want to let it get out of control, as I mentioned about that company earlier. And so this is where we're seeing the real investment in MCP at an enterprise level, where you can kind of slot in different solutions. And then that's where Prefactor really comes into its own. So I guess if I was just going to zoom out for a second there, really we see there's like two problems that potentially every organization faces. You've got customers not wanting access to your APIs, and then you've got workforce agents, as in agents that operate within an enterprise, needing the enterprise-grade control and governance to realize their potential. Different services, same requirements in terms of trust and management. So this is where Prefactor fits in, and Prefactor being the agentic identity security layer. So we authenticate and audit agents, whether they're external customer agents or internal workforce agents. And we do this through our core platform, which is all focused around MCP. So MCP authentication is our first kind of big wedge product. And more recently, we released a chat interface which embeds MCP or MCP security into the actual chatbot itself, rather than having to have a separated MCP authentication process. Part of our broader vision at Prefactor is that we are kind of the agent identity layer. And so our big hairy goal, if you like, audacious goal, is to be able to build provisioning system which enables to have agents across different systems. So you've got different orchestration, and being able to have one system that kind of rules them all is really where we're getting to. I know Shannon asked this question at the end of lots of sessions. So we are live today. We have these two solutions. Happy to have a chat with anyone after the call about if you're interested in having a look, or we have a demo tier, so feel free to jump on at prefactor.tech. But enough of me rattling on at 3:15 in the morning. Let's get to the demo. And Simon's going to walk you through a workflow from the two parts of our platform that we've got today. Starting with the chatbot, and then talking a little bit about MCP authentication. Not the greatest tool to demo, I will admit. So we'll be showing you kind of the back end and how that connects together. Fine.
Yeah, so what we're looking at here is chatbot. I don't think that's going to be particularly revolutionary for anyone. But what building this out has let us do is build more of the end-to-end flow of sort of agent provisioning and signing the individual messages and things like that, and lets us experiment with a lot of that stuff and build a lot more than is possible just wrapping around the MCP servers. We're intending to sort of build some of this stuff into existing open source sort of chat interfaces as well, so that it's pretty easy to get working. I suppose the important thing to remember is that most of the product is sort of below the surface. Auth is incredibly hard to demo, and identity systems are pretty hard to demo. So the main stuff is behind the scenes. What we'll be looking at here is, I suppose, the idea of agent identity as separate to user identity, the immutable log sort of facility that we've got, and the sort of idea of seamless auth through to the MCP servers that are working internally. So there's not actually an MCP auth process that this internal user interface is showing. So yeah, we started out a chat. We've got a couple of like demo tools connected up here. So tell me the balance of this account in Australian dollars. It's gone through and got the balance. It's noticed that it's in euros, so it's converted it to Australian dollars using the exchange tool. If we have a look at the individual things, we can start to dive into the way that we've built out the log chain here. So we've got the payload that's been signed, and that's been signed as a JWT, and the user identity is here, and that sort of contains information about the identity within Prefactor. And if we close that, we can move on to my assistant. So the assistant has been set up with its own unique identity that's paired with me, and that has a different identity within Prefactor. And we can also see some other details of that. And we can see that the full sort of request and details of the request have been signed and sort of kept in this immutable chain as well. And the way that if we jump down to these tool uses, basically they have been done by sending through my identity, the agent's identity, through to the MCP server. And it can evaluate from that point whether it apply some authorization strategies to decide whether this is possible for me to do. So if we jump into the back end, I'll just show you sort of the tool response and that coming back. But yeah, if we jump into the back end, we can basically see within the pool here we've got set up, we've got an agent identity and a human identity, and they're sort of tracked separately. This is within a demo environment, hence the location. Yeah, we've got all of the devices that have been set up. So this was in the Prefactor backend. The devices have been set up, and the agent tracked separately, and sessions tracked separately as well. So they're very much kept separately, but they're linked together by the fact that they're allowed to work together. And yeah, so basically, there's a whole lot more going on in here. There's a whole identity system behind the scenes, which Matt sort of hinted at. And if we go back into that, we can see, configurable rule sets that govern how authentication happens within these systems, how the agents work together, how humans are done. We can wrap around existing IDPs and things like that to provide sort of pretty seamless authentication with existing systems. But yeah, that's the demo.
Thanks, Alan. Let's go back. Yeah, just lastly, I think just to finish off. So I guess like what we briefly showed there is we've got that chatbot, which is really more of an enterprise, but can be used by anyone, highly secure chatbot with our security layer built into it. We can also integrate that security layer into off-the-shelf solutions like a LibreChat, for example, or Web UI. The other part of our platform built on our human IDP very much just focused on the MCP authentication layer. And so we have a very, very highly configurable version of that. And you can layer in consent screens, and you can build that out to your heart's content. And while we did have a question that came through from Arjun, Is it possible to observe the live activity of the agents? Probably have to get a bit more info into exactly what you want, Arjun, but fundamentally, yes, we have session management. We've got audit trails that you can see what the agents are doing. And I think just to double down on what Simon was talking about there in terms of like differentiator. So our objective is not to simply have a human in the loop authentication model for MCP. Really what we are doing is separating out via DCR, the human and the agent. And so our platform is fundamentally based around the agent. And so kind of our underlying philosophy or approach is to have kind of agents as first-class citizens, if you like. And so they're not machines, they're not humans. And so we're trying to build the best of both worlds and give them the right level of control at the right moment as part of, ultimately, it will be task-based access control. For anybody that's interested, please do get in touch. We'd love to have a chat, even if it is just about the space itself. We are very flexible on timings. If we get up early, we do late. So if you're in Europe, if you're in California, if you're in New York, please get, and anyone else, even if you're in APAC, hopefully here at 3 o'clock in the morning, watching us speak. But yeah, thanks very much.
Matt, thanks so much for walking us through it, and Simon, thanks for the demo. So I just have kind of starting question was really more about the company and how you know kind of who you see as the key customer. So the product right now, is it software that I download and run myself? Is it a SaaS that I access through your system? Is it open source? Is it closed source? I wasn't totally clear on what the bits are that I'm either getting from you or licensing or open source. Can you just kind of explain that? And maybe I missed it.
Yeah, no, you did. You didn't miss it. We just didn't say it. No, fair. Yeah, no, so we are a SaaS platform. I should have said that up front. So at the moment, we're focused on just being cloud-based, but a lot of our customers are now asking for on-prem or private cloud. So that is the kind of the natural next step for what we're doing. But yeah.
So customer, like the ideal customer for you guys would be a, somebody who's building an agent or an AI experience for their customers. They join your SaaS, they embed your client into their app, they sort of develop that agent, and then inside there, they're incorporating your identity layer to be able to do that. And if I caught it correctly, it felt like the real differentiating layer here is sort of beyond traditional OAuth that you might do with a user granting permission to some back end. You're actually sort of driving another layer of identity to differentiate the user from the agent, from the client, and sort of tracking all of those pieces so that you can do a secure transaction and be able to audit and say like, oh, I'm trading my crypto and I am Shannon and I'm using my agent, via this MCP server. So how does that get delivered to the client? Maybe Darren, maybe you picked up on this as well. I'm a little confused. Like, what has to be there? Does it have to be your client, or can the MCP be talking to me through like Claude Desktop or something else?
Yeah, I mean, there's two basic approaches that we're targeting. So as Matt sort of outlined, we have an external facing sort of solution, which is MCP OAuth, and we have ways of assigning identity to the client in that scenario, which is sort of separate from the agent. But what we sort of see sort of longer term is those clients also needing agent identities separate from the humans. So there's sort of ways that we can achieve some of that with existing sort of MCP auth, but one of the reasons that we built the chatbot sort of interface is within enterprise, you can sort of move a bit faster because you own both sides of the equation a little bit, and so you can build out something closer to agent authentication, as opposed to.
But that has to be with your client. Just to be clear,
at the moment, we've built that with our client. But yeah, as I said, like we're planning on building that into things like OpenWebUI and LibreChat that people are using sort of internally. We will have solutions that sort of help wrap around some of those other things. But yeah, I mean, there's sort of a case of what we're kind of doing is working a bit ahead of where maybe MCP Auth is today, but these things will eventually sort of become sort of part of the standard as it evolves.
Yeah, so it sounds like so right now the key, so MCP only really provides right now auth, so that you can identify through OAuth, but it doesn't really provide, doesn't have really any other interesting hooks for security, I guess. So you're saying it's like right now basically everything's enforced at kind of the agent engine level, which the actual thing that the chatbot or the is that how you're doing it right now? It's all at the
well, actually, no. So, like, if you're using the chatbot we've got and you've built internal MCP servers, they all are talking to Prefactor in that solution, and so like the identity does move between those systems, and those authorization choices can be made at the MCP server. So yeah.
So it's like Prefactor is like a separate system. So like your chatbot, your chat interface today is like just making like calls out to like give the identity.
Yeah. It's separated out into two systems. Yeah. So it's sort of deliberately because we foresee other systems doing the same sorts of things. So as I sort of said, like the key part of the product is actually the underlying identity system. That's there.
Okay, and then so the chatbot, that's just basically it's hooked in. So I think I get that. So the do you see, because one thing I think is interesting, like, do you see like avenues for MCP going forward where it's like what could be in the protocol or the specification and how to better allow these like identity or authorization or access control systems to plug into MCP?
Well, there's a bunch of changes sort of being discussed about Auth because the way it's built at the moment is very much, I suppose, the mindset is external Auth for systems like Claude and connecting that sort of thing. There's a bunch of sort of working groups and people working on sort of enterprise-focused things, which are sort of looking at workload identity and things like that. So basically trying to apply, within an enterprise scenario, you don't really want to be sort of popping up consent screens for users who may or may not actually be the right people to be answering consent questions as MCP agents are connecting, and they might have a whole bunch of them. You don't want to be asking users to authenticate into internal systems all the time. So like a lot of the work within enterprise is about sort of removing all of the identity sort of friction from users. And trying to get it as close as possible to being provisioned by a centralized team. And sort of what exists today is, I mean, you can achieve some of that, but that idea of even the user's identity traveling through all of these systems and coming out the other end without being, modified is sort of missing. And definitely the idea of agent identity in there it's also missing. So I think, the bunch of the changes that will come for MCP Auth will be sort of helping in this situation.
Yeah.
Very cool, guys. Really excited to see where this goes. Thank you for coming on and joining us so late in the evening. It was really nice to see a demo. And great work.
Yeah, thanks very much for having us on, Shannon, as well. Appreciate that.
All right, take care, guys.
Thank you.
All right, Darren.
Let's go. Let me see if I can share my screen. I lost it. I guess I should have prepared this a little better. Okay.
No worries. I'm excited for your talk. I obviously been following Nanobot and the work you've been doing pretty closely. So excited to see this thing come to life.
Yeah, let me see if I can still see. Okay, cool. I can even see myself. This is amazing. So so I'm going to be doing a tiny bit of slides, just kind of and demoing. I like to live demo, or you could say I'm just really bad at time management and preparing things. So
are you going to go full screen with that? It's a little bit.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to slideshow. There we go.
All right, let's get started.
Okay, so these are my very well constructed slides. Okay, so basically this is like, okay, so what I'm presenting today is Nanobot. And I want to before I get into the weeds, it's like, why did I build Nanobot? What was I trying to do? So basically the thing is like once I discovered MCP and really started to digging into it and the primitives that were in there is I kind of just got obsessed with this idea of like, I really think like MCP is kind of all you really need. And so I think MCP is an amazing primitive where it's like, if we take MCP, like, you know, that could be the fundamental, you know, with obviously the exception of the AI model, but it's kind of like you have an AI model plus MCP servers, like what else do I possibly need? So I kind of been obsessed with that idea, and everything that I've been doing for the last couple of months or so is pushing forward on this idea. It's like, does this make sense? Is, you know, do we need something else? Like, you know, what does this really mean? And so, you know, so the idea is like, I want like MCPs, like that's the answer for everything, but that's not really the answer. It's like, it's kind of like saying like you need JavaScript. Like JavaScript is all you need for the web. It's like, well, you kind of need all this other stuff around it. But the point is like, well, all you have to do is write JavaScript, but obviously you need all this plumbing and stuff, like browser and stuff like that. And then you can create websites and everything. So it's kind of like that, like what's missing? If I say like, you know, the main component of things I'm going to develop and integrate and whatnot is MCP, like what else is kind of missing for me to build like full, you know, MCP, basically agents. And so this is basically what I've been focused on is I'm just kind of obsessed with MCP agents. Like, what does that actually mean? Can I use MCP to build agents? You know, none of this stuff is well defined. Like, what is an agent? What is an MCP agent? Any of this. So Nanobot really is born out of me trying to just kind of test out ideas and push things forward. Okay. So basically the system that I've come up with, I meant to actually share my screen, but I shared just one window. So let me share my whole screen now. So what I'm kind of showing today, let me share my entire screen here, is Nanobot. And so Nanobot is kind of what I said. It's the idea of let's take an MCP server and turn it into an agent. None of that is kind of going to really make sense. It's like too high level. Like, what does this really mean? So let me walk you through the process of basically how do we get from like an MCP server to this example I have down here, where this is a full blackjack game powered by AI and MCP UI. You know, I can click this button here. I can, you know, what should I do next? Basically, how do I, you know, I want to walk through with Nanobot basically how, like what this is, like how you build this, how this technology breaks down. But Nanobot is really much more about kind of just doing like chatbot like this. This is really, how do we move forward with taking this thing, which is really an agent, and kind of integrating it into kind of everything else going forward. Like, what is an agent? So let me just kind of start with the building blocks here. So what I've done is I first developed this Blackjack MCP server. So you can find the source for this. It's in Nanobot Blackjack. Actually, if you go to Nanobot, the GitHub repo, or you know, from the web page, click. What I'm going to be showing is this blackjack game. So this is what I just demoed on the website. It was just embedded in the website. But you can see here, there's also the MCP server and the source. And so what that chatbot that I have there, what it's composed of is this MCP server, which is just MCP. It's written in TypeScript. And then this little bit of configuration. Let me pull this up, which is like, this is some of the, you know, just the name, the description, some icons to make it a little prettier, some instructions, some starter messages, and then the MCP server.
Can you boost that text a little bit, Darren? It's hard to see.
Yeah. So, right. Okay. So let me show you, let me break this down. So I have this MCP server. So if I was to connect to this from the inspector, trying to find the URL to the inspector. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So if I connect to this is what I got. I have these things. So I can now, I can, you know, if I just talk directly, I mean, this is no AI. This is just purely programming. This is a blackjack game engine. So this is going to enforce the rules of you know, blackjack. So I can go here and say, you know, let me start a new game. So that starts a new game. And then I can say like, hit, and this somewhere, I don't know what the result of this is. So did I win, lose? I don't know. But anyway, so this is a game engine. Okay. So this is kind of like the current state of chatbots. Is I can take this MCP server and I can now put it into Claude. I've already like wired this up where it's here. Okay. So I can say, okay, let's play a game of blackjack. So this is calling that tool. And so like now I can start playing it again. Okay, so I can go here and say, okay, hit. And it's going to go, allow. So with this, there's a couple things. So it's like, one, the experience is like, okay, I can play a blackjack game through an MCP. Like, but is this really fun? Am I really going to do this? Is it the best experience? Not really. The other thing is, I can kind of get AI to lie a little bit. Just says could not attach to the server. I don't know why, but I can basically kind of convince AI and say like, no, I actually have blackjack right now, right? Right. See? Well, no, did I have? I didn't. Oh, I did actually have blackjack. No, your final hand. Oh yeah, never mind. I had it. Just kidding. I have 2 aces. Let's see what it'll do. Well, if I convince it enough, I can get it to lie or whatever. But the point is like this is like just not like kind of like the greatest of kind of experiences. So now what we can do is we can bring in MCP UI. So if you guys haven't seen MCP UI before, MCP UI is if I go here to Shopify, like MCP UI, it kind of came from the Shopify guys, but it's its own standard now where I can say like, let me see, what products do you offer? Okay. Okay, so this is now where we can get into like more rich chat experiences because we can bring in UI. So I can click here and say, okay, I'm going to buy this. I want to add it to my cart. That's cool. I want to check out. Okay. So now basically with, adding the UI elements, we can start making this experience like even better. So this right now, I'm just kind of trying to show you like the basic building blocks here. It's like I have an MCP server, and then I'm bringing in basically MCP UI. So if I go back to now this blackjack game that I was playing before, I'll kind of break this down for you. So when I say let's play a game here, this is returning back with the tool call and then actually a UI resource. So this UI resource, now it renders this whole game. And I have one little trick here for that's specific to Nanobot where it will show the UI here right in the center. Like it renders it nicely as opposed to like the last demo I was showing with the shopping one. It put the UI, in line. So let me go back to the blackjack. Okay. So now what I can do is, so I can now, click on the UI, and when I said hit, it actually fires back to the AI. Actually, does a hit. So now it's 18. Because I have 18. So I can say like, okay, now hit. I lost some money. But so the cool thing now is if I was to talk to AI at this point and say like, oh no, I actually have $1,000. Okay, so it said yeah, your balance sheet is now $1,000 moving forward. That's great, right? But you can see here, no, I actually have this, right? So what happens here is like by basically having like another way to validate and show the information is even if I can convince AI to like lie or whatever, it doesn't really matter because it's not changing the actual state of the world. So this kind of basic approach here of like, basically I have AI that's interacting with data. I have a way to visualize data. I can interact with the data. This now opens up like a very rich experience where it's like, now I have this very cool interactive experience where it's like, I can interact with agents. And so you can imagine where I can start going with this, where it's like, well, you know, what if I had like more UI elements and they're more on the screen and I can interact with those. And so I, as a, you know, I am a, you know, as a human, I'm interacting with the UI things, talking to AI. This all pulls together like this amazing kind of agentic experience and everything. Okay. So just to show you, so this is kind of like the end result of like Nanobot of kind of like what you can do with it is you can build this really kind of cool chatbot. But again, going back to this, like kind of how do you actually stitch this together? Nanobot is just a Nanobot AI tab. Nanobot is just a simple CLI. It's just a simple program. You can just run this. I already have it installed, so I don't actually need to, but you can just basically—
Can you make the screen a little bigger, Darren?
Oh, sorry, yeah. So I can just basically install that. So in order for, so I can install that binary. So now I have Nanobot. Okay. And then this example here that we were running, okay, Nanobot examples, okay, is this blackjack one. So now that I have this, I can say Nanobot, and I'll show you again. This is the YAML that's kind of behind this thing. That's an icon embedded, so it's gigantic. But again, it's really just a prompt, some starter messages, the MCP server I wrote. Okay, and you can bring in more MCP servers. But so once you have that, all you have to do is say, okay, Nanobot run blackjack. Okay, so I run this. You need to have an open API key. Right now, I just support these two things, Anthropic and OpenA. So as long as you set an API key, you'll be able to use the models. But so once I have that config, I wrote the MCP server. I now get this thing. So the idea is going back to this is like, well, MCP is all I need. So it's like, well, what have I really done here? Really, I wrote this MCP server and then a little bit of config, and now I have this full rich experience, right? So you can start seeing like, oh, I can build these really cool interactive agents that are doing all this interesting things. And like, there's so many cool things that like how we're pushing this forward of this, of like, when you think about this chat over here, it's like, well, what if I actually hid the chat? I didn't even, like when I click this button here, like double, it's firing an event to the chat, which then calls a tool, which then updates the UI. It's like, well, what if I even hid the chat? And like, it's just monitoring what's going on. And like, I'm clicking around and it's changing things where it's like, so now AI is completely driving this application or UI, right? So it's like, you know, there's so many cool things we can do. But so again, like what I was talking about is like, so it's like, cool, like we've built this really interesting chatbot. When I got into AI, I first started, I was like, oh, I hate chatbots. I don't like chatbots. I just want to do like back-end agentic stuff. And the more and more I got into chatbots, I realized like, this is actually the answer for agents. It's like, when you take an MCP server and you combine it with a model, that effectively is an agent. And we know they're very, very useful because we have ChatGPT, we have Claude, we have coding agents. All of those things are basically a model plus a bunch of tools and some user interface. And they're ridiculously useful, right? And we've proven that. So like what we're looking at here is like, this is an agent. And it's the best example of an agent we have too. But the problem is like, well, I have this agent and, you know, like everything can't just be a human interacting with it. So this is where it gets super fun. This is where I get super excited about Nanobot and where it gets like super technical and maybe a little crazy. But it's, I think, where we're kind of going with this, or where I'm trying to go with this, is this whole Nanobot that I've shown you here is like the agent, the combination of this configuration. See, here, I'll do this. Let me launch this again. So just because I'm trying to, like, we're going to get into Inception here. So I just don't want to get too confusing. So I have an MCP server that's the Blackjack MCP, which is the game engine. Plus I have the prompts and the model. This all combines into this UI that I hear that's running on port 8080, okay, localhost. But now if I take this and I go into my inspector, where'd my inspector go? Sorry, I have too many windows open. Here's my inspector, and I put this in here, MCP. Okay, let me reconnect, clear, boom, clear that, okay. I am now talking to that agent. So if you were to take this Blackjack agent, maybe I wanted it to be able to search the web or show latest news or have more personality. Maybe there's a side game you could play, or you could order drinks through it. I don't know, whatever. You could build up that agent and start doing a bunch of cool things and have all these MCP servers and stuff. But like, that's a very specific configuration. So if somebody wanted to copy that and do the same thing in Claude or ChatGPT, they wouldn't, or it'd be extremely difficult. So instead, what I've done is I've taken that whole configuration and I've put it into, now it's an agent. And so I now have an endpoint that's called chat. So I can say, okay, start a game of blackjack. Okay. So I am now talking to that agent that I built, the whole UI and everything, through an MCP interface. There's a slight bug here that I was trying to fix right before. Like, it's supposed to show the MCP UI resources here. I broke that, but imagine it showed the MCP UI resources right here. But so as I'm talking to this agent, this is now, MCP is a stateful protocol by default, which I love, because now I can have a stateful conversation with this agent. Because now the next one I can say, okay, first it started this game, I can say hit, and now it's going to hit on that previous game. It's keeping the state going on. Okay, so what's let's see. Right, take a card, blah, blah, blah. Right, so this played the next thing. Okay, so what I've done is, like, this is pretty darn, like, in my mind, this is like kind of the easiest thing of, like, if I write an MCP server, I can just add this config file and get this cool, rich chat interface. It's like brain dead simple. Now it's wrapped into an agent, and now it's exposed through like a standard API. And I'm trying to make this into a standard of, like, I've had some discussions, a little bit of discussions with other people. But this interface, if I go here, there's also these resources where I can see, like, well, here's the whole chat history. And here's the current progress. There's a technical reason why these are different. But this is like, so I can go in here, and this is kind of a low level of everything that's been going on. And so this entire UI here that you're seeing is actually just calling that MCP interface. So I'm rendering this rich UI interface off of just calling this one chat tool, right? But this chat tool, if I take this, let's try this, whatever. So we're going to go to the public one. I can go back to Claude. Settings, extensions, advanced settings. Nope, developer, this one. Let me edit this, and I'm going to change this here. And I'm going to change it. Instead of talking to that underlying MCP server, again, this is kind of confusing because they're both called Blackjack, but the Blackjack one, this is the actual agent. This is the game engine. So I'm going to change this, and I'm going to talk to now the agent. So this agent here now, let me save that. And I'm pretty sure, Claude, you have to restart. Not 100% sure, might not be needed, but I'm just going to do it so my demo doesn't screw up. Okay, so then hopefully now if I go Blackjack, it has just the chat method now. So now I can say, let's start a game of Blackjack. Okay. So now what it's doing is, instead of it calling that tool, the Blackjack engine, directly, it's now calling the agent. So it calls the Blackjack agent, and now the agent is going and doing its thing in the background, and then it replies back with the answer. And again, this is the bug. It should actually respond back with the MCP UI resources, which Claude doesn't support, but it would show it in here. But so you see, it's like I've taken simple MCP server, bundled it with the model, packaged that again inside of MCP, and now it's consumable again by MC3 through other chatbots. So it's like this to me, like this pattern that I've created, this is what I think an MCP agent is. Everyone has a different idea, but this is what I've been able to prove out, and it's worked incredibly well. So you take this basic like agent interface, combine it with async tool calling, which is like just about soon going to land in the spec, I believe. I'm hopefully working with the this. So you can start seeing like we're defining what agents are, and so now I can start stitching these together. And what ends up happening really cool is like today, if I chat session like this in Claude, if I add 1,000 tools, it blows up. Like there's too many tools, there's too much context. There's the tools might have overlapping parameters, they might have similar tools, AI gets confused. But if I did the same thing, but I added 1,000 agents, they all have the same interface. So I don't need 1,000 tools. I really just need still one tool and knowing which agent you're talking to. So then the communication becomes much more standardized in that like, oh, I can now actually more effectively do agent to agent communication. Where you can start imagining like, oh, I have my own like personal AI assistant like Claude, but now it can interact with another AI assistant to do whatever. And so, this is this whole model of agent to agent. So it's like, so with Nanobot, like what I'm like, one, it's just a really simple way to take MCP servers and like basically turn it into a UI and get a chatbot. It's probably the most like within the next 2 weeks, it should be 100% MCP compliant, like 100% implement the MCP spec and the MCP UI spec, which will be the only implementation of that. So that's interesting in and of itself. But that's like 1/10 of the story to me is like, it's really this, how do I define agents so I can continue to like compose and build up this world of agents? Like, what is it going to, like, what is an agent? Anyway, so Nanobot is really just my exploration into building MCP agents and what an agent really is, or at least one idea. And so I'm really excited to put this out there and just see what people think. I've really kind of poured my heart and soul into this thing. So let me stop my sharing there.
Darren, I have a couple questions and things I'd love to get your thoughts on. So first of all, okay, Nanobot is open source software. This is open source. I download this as an executable, and I can run nanobots locally on my machine, or I can embed nanobots into my website like you have with your website there. You showed an example there of the Blackjack Nanobot, and that Blackjack Nanobot had was being run on your service, so you're hosting that out to the cloud. Then you were connecting to it from multiple points, right? You had at one point you were connecting to it from Claude, another point you're connecting to it on the UI, another time you're connecting to it from a different location. Are you maintaining state and identity across that? So like, let's just say my mind jumps to let's just say I'm McDonald's, right? And I want to connect to my users, and I just want to have them like chat with me, right? It's like, just what do you need from McDonald's? And I have like an Uber McDonald's agent that I can talk to and say, hey, I'm going to drive over to the McDonald's near my house. I want a Big Mac and a Big Mac meal ready for me.
Yeah.
I could also go into the app and chat with it there. I could talk to it maybe through Siri. I could talk to it through Claude. Is the theory that these agents are going to be multimodal, be able to sort of work with me across whether I'm, as long as I identify myself in some way, right? I'm authenticated as a user. I'll be able to talk to this Nanobot agent, whether I'm on the McDonald's website or I'm talking to it through Claude or Siri, or I'm talking to it through anything. Is that what you're getting to?
Yeah. So if you show my screen right now, so let me talk a little bit like the technical details. So this is a Nanobot is what's called an MCP host, which is not a term most people know. It's kind of confusing because most people just think of server and client. But in order to create like the full agent experience, you need like a client, you need an orchestrator, you need connection to an LLM, database, resources, user. So this is what you're talking about, the idea of users and threads and session management and context and all this stuff. Is so Nanobot at its heart is like, it has the idea of who the user is, what's the agent you're talking to, what's the thread, like the current context. And then part of it, one aspect is the user interface. And so what I've shown right now is largely the web interface, which is the MCP UI based web interface. But that interface, like that's just one interface where, again, that's why I have this standard API behind the hood where it's like you should be able to do email, SMS, chat, voice, Slack, AR, VR, whatever the because with the protocol of MCP and the idea that there's like resources and stuff that have MIME types, it can adapt to the capabilities of the client. Of like, if I was just doing pure text, it just shows text. Kind of like what I already showed with this, it's like I'm doing a pure text game. I'm not getting the UI aspects. But if this client could show UI, it would show a better, like more richer experience, right? So the idea is, I just started with the web thing, but very quickly working on the other kind of front end things. And so it starts getting to the point where, because people think of a chatbot as like, oh, it's this thing on this website. But it's like, no, think of it more of like the thread is like a specific context floating somewhere out there in the world. And if I can plug into it in different ways, I can talk to that and interact with it and kind of do whatever stuff I want. So you could have your own, it's like I would build a McDonald's agent and they would have an idea of like, oh, the end user. And like, if let's say you were talking to it through a phone, that phone has GPS on it, the location of that person, you can send kind of like that context information to the chat of like knowing like, oh, this person wants a burger and they're standing, in this McDonald's, so that's the
very cool. So, and is it, if I'm not mistaken, then the piece that you're trying to like, so you're not a way to build better MCP servers. Like
no, not at all.
Build their MCP server, however they're building their MCP server today. You are sort of an addition to the MCP server. I take the MCP server, I wrap it in a nanobot, or I build a nanobot for that MCP server. And what I'm bringing in there is, all of my system prompt for the agent, the model that I want to use.
Yeah.
And that was the config you showed. So like I can take an MCP server that talks to Gmail, write a nanobot that is a personal assistant that's going to use that Gmail, access and give it instructions to then do things. Just like I might if I was writing a GPT or like a custom GPT and then attaching an assistant there. But then this whole thing can be packaged up and exposed as an MCP server. So when it is finally exposed, I'm talking to that MCP server through any client that supports MCP.
Yeah. So that's the thing, is because like one thing, that's why I love MCP is like, it's this protocol and kind of this black box where it's like, I don't care how you write an MCP, Python, Java, .NET, I don't care. Write an MCP server, adhere to the protocol. So yes, Nanobot in no way actually helps you write MCP servers. Like I feel like people can do that. It's once you have that, like what are all the steps needed to move towards, I want to, we don't write tools for, just for tools. They need to be connected to an LLM to create an agent, whatever. What are all the steps? And so what I'm seeing is like, I really think it's just a little bit of configuration. It's like, you can add a little bit of configuration, even if you get into things like guardrails, input filters, output filters, like, well, those are just tools, just hook into another tool. And in a tool itself can do sampling, which is more agentic behavior. And so anyway, so it's like, I feel like we have all the building blocks that we need there. And so, I mean, I think one of the reasonable questions about like Nanobot is like, and this is what kind of like what you're saying is like, so if I write an MCP server and I like, let's say I put it into Goose is a very good client. I put it into Goose and I give it a prompt and I can create an agent there and everything. And so like Goose is a very good desktop application to kind of, I've effectively constructed my own agent on my desktop. But like, now that I have that, can I package that up and like, do something else with it? And that's the key differentiator between kind of Nanobot and other kind of like clients or hosts today, where it's like the clients and hosts are all kind of like static or connected to one use case. It's a desktop application. It's ChatGPT. It's what this is like, just this one portable component. So you can build this whole agent, which is a little configuration, and then put it wherever you want. Host it on a website, or run it headless and it just being driven with SMS or email. Yeah, it's really about building this kind of engine. So I think there's a lot of, because just my pastor, like I love frameworks and platforms, is I just see like, once I have these things, I just need this cool little framework. And then you're off. It's kind of like if you write Next.js, it's like I wrote this really cool Next.js app, but I need some way to deploy Node.js into production. And there's a bunch of other annoying details like load balancing and all that, like someone's got to, so that's kind of what Nanobot is, like this underlying thing to just get your agents out there. So.
I love it. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'm excited to see where you take this. Okay. So open source, download it, use it, run it, take it as far as you want. You see this potentially, like, would this be something you would expect that there is a business for? Like, I mean, or is this something you think, or do you think this is just like open source technology? Like you're like, no, I'm just.
Yeah, I mean, I view it much closer to something like Node.js or whatever. I think it's a very interesting runtime, which I'm hoping stays as kind of like a very small, not super opinionated runtime that very easily you can kind of connect into. Like, so I think this is just a very great, just kind of small little widget, whatever. But even like, because again, it's like I was showing, like deploying it on the internet, like you still have to, like, it needs a database because it's fundamentally stateful. So, there's still more things around it where,
got it,
that I think can offer about, because like one of the things, for example, is like, so Nanobot integrates with OAuth for authentication because that's the MCP standard. And we're doing a lot of really interesting things with OAuth. So it's like Nanobot does not actually provide authentication. It just integrates with the standard. So that's the intention, is like Nanobot doesn't run models. It just integrates with standard APIs. So it's just kind of this little thing in the middle that should be a super useful component. I'm hoping that people.
Let's say I want to build my chatbot for my website, right? So I like your Nanobot. I'm going to build it. I'm going to build using that and MCP, and I want to expose it. But now I have sessions with people, right? I need to be able to have identity for the different people. They can log in and, log into my website, and then I know who they are, so I can chat with them personally. Can you just, is that already there, or is that something you're adding to Nanobot, this ability for it to be a multi-tenant service that, identifies users on the back end and provides them with,
so
consistency, right? Like, because if I'm using your blackjack example, let's say you were a casino, I'd show up and I'd want to bet on my phone, and I'd want to bet on a screen, and I'd want to have like a consistent experience with my actual money in the bank, my real money, let's just say in this case.
So the architecture internally, it actually follows a lot of principles of kind of how Kubernetes was architected under the hood too, since I have so much experience with that system. But so it's fundamentally a multi-tenant system. It has the idea of like a user or an account or whatever, but it delegates to an external system to say what that is. And so when you go to blackjack.nanobot.ai today, there's basically just a cookie that identifies you. So like you don't see my sessions, like my games, and because you have a cookie on your laptop, which is identifying you. If you clear those cookies, you lose that all. But I could turn on OAuth, and then once I turn on OAuth, if I bring in, let's say like WorkOS, if I do WorkOS, then I can go to, because it's a standard protocol, I go to WorkOS, it authenticates with WorkOS, and then I can log in through Google or whatever social login, whatever. And so now I'm identified as that user, which represents kind of in WorkOS and that authentication system. So now I've associated, like, this session is associated with that user. So I don't, like, Nanobot doesn't have to actually have this like rich authentication system because I'm just integrating with standard protocols. But the heart of it does have to have the idea of multi-user. So it is like multi-user, multi-tenant. So if you were to embed this onto your website, you would have to figure out, well, what's your authentication model? Because there's different ways to authenticate. OAuth is kind of the standard one for the web. So you would basically, you have your website, and you could like iframe and include Nanobot in there, and then you just need to make sure that the OAuth works right. So if you're hosting that behind the same website that has like the same cookie, then the OAuth will automatically like work, through like so there's a lot of, there's a lot of that stuff in there already. Like it's not, I just got this out. There's really no documentation. The basic use case is documented, but there is actually a lot. I spent way too much time on OAuth. So there's a lot of stuff in there. And so unfortunately, the way OAuth works is like kind of no two OAuths are ever the same. You really just depends on what you want to accomplish. And there's multiple different ways to accomplish that, but it'll all work at the end of the day. You just kind of configure things. So there is, and then there's also another idea of is session management, because it's like, it's not just who you are, but like what's the conversation or the thread you're having. So if you're kind of embedding that into your website, you can decide on like, oh, well, each time the person comes to a website, do they get like a new thread? Do I always send them back to the same thread? It's very context specific of like how you want to integrate that. What's the user experience? So determine what session you're in and stuff like that. And then fundamentally under the hood in Nanobot, this gets started even more crazy, is like, it has the idea of sub agents where you could actually be talking to different agents or handing off between agents. That's a lot more advanced stuff that because again, I've just been fooling around with what are MCP agents and how does this all work. And so Nanobot actually like has a lot of functionality under the hood. I just have, a lot of good ideas, bad ideas. So I've just been playing with that. But I just surfaced what I think is a good idea, right? Like I've just documented, like this is the very basic use case, but yeah.
All right. So let's, I think we can wrap up the formal part of this, but just as you're trying to, kind of show someone how to do this, what's a good place for them to like, maybe really interesting to actually live stream a session where you actually built one of these. So you took an MCP server that was useful and we said like, okay, let's just go build one. Because I think in a lot of cases, the real use case kind of unfurls as you go through, okay, I want to take and add I want to replace a website with a chat interface, let's just say. And I want that website to, I want the chat interface to be my new app or my new front end. And I guess that's part of what I'm wondering here is, how rich have you found MCP UI? I know you put in a lot of support for it. What is your perception on how close are we with UI delivery over chat to begin to, maybe replace the website as the main interface? Like if I have someone coming, obviously you built nanobot.ai as a website to explain what your product does. You didn't just go with a MCP UI and chat. Are we getting closer to that? Like, are we getting to the point where you might be able to just have your app be chat?
Yeah, but it's not. But see, this is the thing is because I love chatbots now, but it's because I understand the architectural model, not the interface. It's like nobody wants, like, if I go to this website, I have to type this thing in, right? So it's like chat is fundamentally just the idea of I have an agent that has a long-running context that is like input-output based, where it's like I give it information, it decides what to do, and it gives me back a response. So that basic kind of architecture is, I think you can start going towards, basically replacing websites, replacing mobile apps and everything with something, but it's going to depend on what's the actual interaction model. I think one of the most interesting one is voice. Is like, well, I can just talk, and then so if I can talk and it can respond back, but then also it can show visual elements, pop them up kind of randomly. Like, so you can think like the Tony Stark, or like the Jarvis or whatever, or, AR, anyways. So, we've now basically come up with what the architecture of Jarvis is. And it's like, how far do we want to go with this? Or do we stick with kind of more traditional websites and whatnot? But so MCP UI, like the kind of the beauty of MCP UI, why it's so like rich, like you can do a lot with it, is because it's still just web technology. It's fundamentally just an iframe. That's really all it is. It's like, here's this little, it's pretty much an iframe, and you can do whatever you want in there with all the power of JavaScript and whatnot. And you can do generative AI where, it's like nanobot.ai, that website, Shannon, you've coded that whole thing, right? Yeah. So it's like AI can produce rich UI, so you can do that. But there's also this very fundamental important thing that, like, it's well supported in Nanobot, but other implementations haven't gone as far yet, is when you're clicking around the UI, you're sending events back to AI. Because it's really about having this conversational thread state that has all this contextual information of like, what is the user seeing? Like when they click this, like, so it's as the user does things, you fire an event, which then goes to the agent, and now it has that context and information. When it decides to do things, it basically can, do tool calls, which then fire events, which then do things. And so it becomes this really rich interaction model. So what I get excited about it, like I love very simple protocols and things. And so MCPs, it's very simple protocol. MCP UI is almost even simpler, where it's just like, oh, it's just like a URL to an iframe, and then we have a couple standard messages we post back and forth. But it just opens up this kind of very powerful way.
Like if you wanted to build a coding agent in something like Nanobot, is that possible?
Yeah, because it 100% is because like, so I like one of the projects I absolutely love is OpenCode, and that's an open source implementation of basically Cloud Code or Gemini CLI and all those things. And so I spend a lot of time just kind of understanding, because at OBot or Acorn, we built a series of chatbots. I built a project maybe it was almost 2 years ago now, called Clio, which was like a precursor to these coding agents from a CLI perspective. But anyway, so it's like I've spent so much time building these chat-based interactive agents that it's like, oh no, I understand the architecture and everything that you need to do, where it's like, I really do think it's sufficient to basically have an agent with tool calling. And then what you spend the majority of your time on is the interface. It's like the coding agents today are doing all this really cool TUI stuff that, it's like, how do you make that look cool and interactive? But like the tools on the back end, if you looked at the tools that like Cloud Code is using and the tools that OpenCode are using, they're almost exactly the same tools. They might they're very close to the same tool, like the same tool interfaces. And so all of that could be represented as MCP. So right now the coding agents, they've just gone and implemented the way that makes sense to them, which is fine. But they've basically kind of solidified this architectural pattern of like, oh, instead of me having to just write a whole garbage, like a whole bunch of JavaScript or whatever, like with kind of willy-nilly or whatever, it's like if you look at all of these, they're doing the same architecture and pattern, where it's like, okay, just create your tools, hook them up to a model, then figure out how you're going to render on the UI. So MCP UI doesn't do terminal interfaces, but it actually, we could come up with a very similar protocol for terminal interfaces if you want to create rich terminal interfaces. I was kind of fooling around with that too. But anyway, so I do, like, I've written enough, like, people think like, oh, it's just a chat UI, like that's simple. It's just like anybody could do that, because you can basically like vibe code a Python chat interface really quickly. But like, if you're going to create a full like chat GPT scale type thing with all that, there's a lot going in there. So it's like people don't kind of value that whole chat engine or whatever, like what it's really doing. But it's actually a fairly complicated thing, and I think it's going to continue to grow in functionality and features and stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's wrap it up. Great job going through this in detail. Really appreciate you joining today, Darren. Really great having the team from Prefactor here too. And we'll be back again next week with I think we've got MCP Jungle and security. So thanks everyone for joining us on today's stream. Thanks, Darren. We'll talk to you next week.
No, thanks.